All right, what's going on, guys? So today I figured I would take you through one of my best ball drafts on Underdog. This is the Puppy Two drafts. Yeah, and just run through my thought process, what I'm thinking in these drafts, what I'm thinking for these best ball tournaments, all that good stuff. Like guys I like this year, guys I dislike, why I went a certain direction I went, things I love about the draft, the things that I dislike, and mistakes that I made. So, without further ado, let's get into it. In this draft, I was picking from the 7 hole. You had McCaffrey, Lamb, Tyreek, Jamar, Jettas, and Amon Ra go 1 through 6. The typical 1 through 6. I was kind of hoping that one of these 5 or 6 hole players was going to take a running back, so I would have a chance at either Justin Jefferson or Amon Ra, because I really love getting that hammer of a wide receiver early and often. But I ended up going with Bijan. For me, it was between Bijan and AJ Brown. Looking back on it, I probably would have went AJ Brown, based on how the rest of the draft went. But I love Bijan still. Bijan's still my number 2 running back. He's my 8th overall player so far. And yeah, I mean, the situation got so much better. The Falcons are going to be way better. The quarterback's going to be way better. They bring in a new style of offense with Zach Robinson, that Sean McVay tree. Really going to hammer the rock. Really going to do a lot of play action. The running back's going to be really involved in the pass game. And that system typically uses a workhorse running back. So the workload for Bijan should be there, the volume should be there, and we all know how talented he is, so the production will follow. Next off the board was A.J. Brown, Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson, Puka Nacua, Jahmyr Gibbs, Marvin Harrison, Drake London, Chris Olave, Brandon Ayuk, Nico Collins. So still really standard, obviously. You're still early in the draft, but I was really debating here between Jalen Waddle and Devontae Adams. Ultimately, I went with Jalen Waddle due to this being a best ball tournament, and you really want guys who can absolutely explode. Not saying that Devontae Adams can't, but everything around Jalen Waddle is very similar, right? It's pretty much the same what we've seen the last 2 years. Mike McDaniel's still in town. Tua's still his quarterback. We've seen Waddle and Tua connect for absolutely massive games in the past. Off the top of my head, 2 years ago, he had that monstrous game in Baltimore where I think both of them had 50 apiece, and they have a game like that, it wins you a week automatically, and you never know how big that week could be. So I decided to go with the stability and the explosive threat of Jalen Waddle over the more consistent 34% target share Devontae Adams. But I think either of those guys is a great pick here. I mean, it's still early, so obviously all these guys are really good. They're all going to be good picks no matter what. Then you see Jonathan Taylor, Saquon, Debo, Devontae Smith, Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson going at the turn. Malik Neighbors, Devon Achane, Mike Evans, DK Metcalf, Sam Laporta. And then it comes back to me. And here I was really stuck between Michael Pittman and Stephon Diggs. I really do like both of those players. I think Stephon Diggs has certainly lost some juice and a step when it comes to separating vertically and getting downfield and on top of DBs and stacking guys and pulling away from them. I don't think he's the same player there, but I still think that Stephon Diggs is going to be that great underneath option for the Houston Texans. He's really going to open up the offense for Nico Collins, Tank Dell, and CJ Stroud, and I think he's going to be a PPR beast. But ultimately, I decided to go with Michael Pittman because I had a thought here when taking Michael Pittman that I would come around and get Anthony Richardson, which you'll see later on. I love Pittman. He had a real true breakout last year. I love the offense he's in with Shane Steichen, one of the best young offensive minds in the entire NFL, calling plays. Anthony Richardson, one of the brightest young quarterbacks. I just think that's a great situation there, and ultimately why I wanted to go with Pittman. And then after Pittman, you see Diggs go right off after Derrick Henry, Josh Allen, Kyron, DJ Moore, Cooper Kupp, Tank Dell, Zay Flowers, Hollywood Brown, T. Higgins, and then it came back to me. And here, since I went running back first round, running back was already off my mind because I like in these best ball formats to get typically 4 wide receivers in the first 7 rounds because of how fast they fly off this board and how important they are, especially to a full PPR league like this is. So I decided to go with Amari Cooper. I think he's a guy who is being pretty significantly undervalued right now in these best ball drafts. He was on pace for 1,300 yards last year. He had a career. He had a career year. He really took a step forward in that Browns offense as the number one receiver with Stefanski, and he had a litany of quarterback options. Right. There should be more stability this year with hopefully Deshaun Watson staying healthy. Hopefully Deshaun Watson not necessarily regains exactly who he was in Houston, but 75% of what Deshaun Watson was in Houston is a top 12 quarterback in the NFL. So if Deshaun Watson can just get a little bit back, Amari Cooper's ceiling should be sky high this year. I definitely don't think he should be going after number twos like T. Higgins or Hollywood Brown or number threes like Tank Dell. Quite honestly, I think he should be more so in this area with DJ Moore and Cooper Kupp. And then right after that, you see Travis Etienne, Travis Kelce, George Pickens, Christian Kirk, Terry McLaurin, Jaden Reed, Mark Andrews, Trey McBride, Dalton Kincaid, Isaiah Pacheco, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Jacobs. And now here is where I decided to go with Anthony Richardson. This is right at ADP for him. But I knew if I passed here and went Godwin or Calvin Ridley, he more than likely isn't coming back to me. And I'm glad I did that because as you see at the turn here, he went CJ Stroud. With no correlation, so I know he would have taken the best quarterback available, and at that spot it would have been Anthony Richardson. Just to break down what I like about Anthony Richardson, I mean, he's an absolute freak, man. He's the most athletic quarterback that's ever come into the league based on RAS metrics and all the athletic testing they do at the NFL Combine. I thought that as a prospect, he was really overlooked and overthought in terms of how developed he was as a pocket passer. I thought people were a little bit overdramatic in terms of how he saw the field and in terms of evading pressure and stepping up in the pocket and ripping those tight window throws. I thought he did that all really well in college. And I thought he had a lot of snaps where you saw he was really trying to be a true traditional pocket passer and use his legs as the X factor, that Konami code quarterback type of thing that we talk about in fantasy football. And then when he got to the NFL, I just saw more of the same. You know, he wasn't scared to rip it into tight windows. He wasn't scared to throw those seam balls, those in breakers on time over the middle of the field. And yeah, I mean, in terms of just pure fantasy production, in the games he was healthy, although I know it's a small sample size, he was the number one quarterback in total in terms of total fantasy points per game. So he stays healthy. I think the sky's the limit. He's my current number 3 quarterback right now, and I'm really thinking about moving up to number 2. He just has the exact skill set you want to chase in fantasy football, and especially a best ball format. A guy who can go out and get you those 40-point weeks because he gives you 100 rushing with 3 rushing touchdowns and then 200 to 300 in the air. Those are the guys you want to be chasing. If you're not going to be stacking traditional pocket passers in these best ball tournaments, you really want to find the absolute X factor quarterbacks, the absolute Konami code quarterbacks like Anthony Richardson, Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels, Jalen Hurts. Those guys who give you such an elite rushing floor and elite rushing upside, because at that point, when they're so good running the football, anything they do throwing it is just a bonus for us, right? It's bonus points. So, yeah, I love Anthony Richardson this year. I think he's a dark horse MVP candidate. And, yeah, sky's the limit for AR-15. And then after that, you see Chris Godwin, Calvin Ridley, James Cook, Keenan Allen, C.J. Stroud, Xavier Worthy, Kyle Pitts, George Kittle, Joe Mixon, Ladd. And then I came back here at the 6-6 with Kenneth Walker. This is the one pick I truly regret, like, pretty badly, especially when you see my 8-hole selection, my 8th round selection. Looking back on it, I love Kenneth Walker as a player. I'm a lot higher on him than most. I think he's going off the board as RB16, and that is straight up too low. But like I said, in these best ball formats, these best ball tournaments, wide receivers fly off the board. You want to typically get 4 in your first 7 picks, which I didn't do in this draft, which is really my biggest mistake based on how big the drop-off is once you get to that 7-8 round mark. So here I easily would have rather had Rome Odunze. I would have rather had Addison. I would have rather had BTJ. I would have rather had D-Hop. I would have rather had Deontay Johnson. But I ended up going Kenneth Walker. I still like Kenneth Walker's upside. I think this Seattle offense is going to be much better than it was last year, especially with Ryan Grubbs coming into town and bringing in a brand new, fresh offense. I think they're going to score a lot of points. I think they're going to be a lot more up tempo, which should lead to more touches for Kenneth Walker. But ideally, I would have rather had one more wide receiver here. And then touching on that, right after I pick Kenneth Walker, you see Addison, Adunze, Rashad White, Brian Thomas, D-Hop, Anais Smith, Brock Purdy, Christian McCaffrey, David Montgomery, Alvin Kamara, Deontay Johnson, and Rashee Rice. So, yeah, I think at the 7-4, Alvin Kamara is probably a really good value here. I would prefer him straight up over Rashad White and David Montgomery and Joe Mixon, to be honest. Full PPR, you know his floor is 80 receptions. It's what he does every single year. They bring in the Shanahan tree, with Clint Kupiak now being the OC there. And I think Kamara has a pretty big bounce back here. I know the O-line's terrible. But if we're being honest, look at that San Fran O-line. They don't have a great O-line. And look at what Christian McCaffrey just did behind it. I'm not saying Alvin Kamara is going to have a Christian McCaffrey year, not even close. But that style of offense really doesn't need an elite O-line. They're always moving forward. They're always imposing their will. And I think Alvin Kamara has a big bounce back year this year. And now here at the 7-7 for me, I ended up going with Brock Bowers. This is exactly the reason why I wanted to go. I would have rather have went wide receiver here because I absolutely hate this drop off here. Not big on Keon Coleman. I'm just not. I don't think his style of play really fits with Josh Allen. I don't like that matchup year one. Jameson Williams, I think we've seen what Jameson Williams is. I'm not so high on him. Jackson Smith and Jigba is another guy that I can't get around to drafting. He's a third wide receiver on this team. He's going to have absolutely zero route participation when it comes to two wide receiver sets. That's going to be DK and Tyler Lockett on the field. And I thought coming out as a prospect, he was an overrated prospect. And then seeing him on an NFL field, he wasn't a first-round receiver in my opinion. He goes in the draft this year late second, early third rounder, in my opinion. I know a lot of people are going to hate that. Everybody loves them some JSN. He's an analytical darling. But the film didn't match up with what the analytics said, in my opinion. And especially in the NFL. He's not as smooth of a separator as people think. He's not an explosive player by any means necessary. He's not a vertical separator. I just think he's a solid number two, potentially, right? I think right now he's clear-cut a number 3 receiver with potential to go up to a number 2. And then moving on, you had Evan Ingram, Aaron Jones, Kyler Murray. I think Kyler Murray is currently an absolute bargain in best ball drafts in all fantasy assets in general, to be honest. I think he's an absolute hammer of a buy in Dynasty at the moment. He's one of those guys, I would rather have Kyler Murray over Joe Burrow in fantasy and Brock Purdy any day of the week. Any day of the week. His skill set, similar to Anthony Richardson, Josh Allen, Jaden Daniels, all these guys who can give you elite rushing upside. I just don't think they should be going under or below pure pocket passers, especially when you have no correlation. This guy here has T. Higgins, so I understand this one a lot more. But in general, I would be chasing this Kyler Murray, especially this guy right here who had Marvin Harrison Jr. I would have easily taken Kyler Murray in this slot instead of Aaron Jones, just to get that stack and that exposure of an elite Konami code quarterback. And then after Kyler, you get Jake Ferguson, Samir White, Najee Harris, and then I think this is the steal of all best ball tournaments right now. I took him ahead of ADP and Jonathan Brooks. He usually goes at that 9 turn, so that 9-1, 8-9 pick. I don't understand it. I know people hate this Carolina offense. I totally understand from last year why you would feel like that. But all they've done is improve, right? They go out and they bring in a brilliant offensive guy to be their head coach in Dave Canales, the guy who is the spark plug for Baker Mayfield's career, guy who revived Baker Mayfield's career last year. You saw how fantasy friendly that offense was to not only just particularly the running back, but all the pieces involved. Mike Evans had a massive year. Chris Godwin was fantasy relevant. And then just touching on Jonathan Brooks alone, He was the number one running back in this class the whole time. He gets legitimate early second-round draft capital. They giving him glaring reviews. His skill set is perfect for PPR. He's a great pass catcher. He's dynamic with the ball in his hands. He breaks a ton of tackles. I don't see a world where, as we get closer to the season, he's even close to the 9th round. I think once the season starts to get closer, you're going to start seeing Jonathan Brooks in the early 6th, maybe late 5th. I think people are really over-dramatizing how bad this Carolina offense is going to be this year. And not only just coaching, they improved on the O-line. They go out and bring in a few O-linemen. They bring in Deontay Johnson via trade, who is a legitimate 1,000-yard receiver every single year. They go out and they trade up into the first round to get Xavier Legette. This offense is not going to be as bad as people think, and I think you're going to realize that as the summer goes on. Yeah, so moving on from Jonathan Brooks, you see Ramondre Stevenson, who just got a bag yesterday, Zach Moss, Cortland Sutton, Tyler Lockett, Jalen Warren, Romeo Doubs, Ricky Pearsall, Dak Prescott, DeAndre Swift, Curtis Samuel, James Conner, Raheem Mostert. So now you guys can see why I love hammering those wide receivers earlier and why I say you really should get 4 in your first 7 picks, because look at these guys here. I mean, do you really want Cortland Sutton with Bo Nix thrown to him? Probably not. Do you want Romeo Doubs, who's probably going to be the number 3 in Green Bay? No. Do you want to have to reach on guys like Ricky Pearsall just to fill out a stack or get another wide receiver? No. Right? I would much rather be taking my shots here at Dak Prescott, DeAndre Swift, Raheem Mostert, Tony Pollard, Trey Benson, Jaden Daniels. But instead I had to go with Brandon Cooks, who I'm really high on. I think Brandon Cooks is another guy who's being really undervalued. Year 2 in this offense, year 2 with Dak. You saw him have, I think he touched double-digit touchdowns last year, if I'm not wrong. It was either 8 or 10. I can't remember. But yeah, I think you're going to see a more productive season from Brandon Cooks this year. They're going to have to throw the ball more. This Cowboys team got much worse over the offseason. They don't have a running back who can truly be a innings eater and take on a ton of carries for them. So they're going to have to air the ball out to stay in games. They're going to have to air the ball out to win games. And I love CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb's going to see close to 200 targets. But Dak Prescott's not just going to throw the ball 200 times, right? So I think Brandon Cooks has a legitimate share in this offense, and I think he has a much better year in year 2 with the Dallas Cowboys than he did last year. Moving on, you see Jordan Love, David Njoku, Jaden Daniels, Tony Pollard, Trey Benson, Caleb Williams, Josh Palmer, Brian Robinson Jr., Khalil Shakir, Tyjae Spears. And here I saw two O's falling. Not necessarily falling. I'm pretty sure I drafted him over ADP. But I had my Waddle share, so I figured I might as well get that stack going as well. Because, like I said earlier with Waddle, he's capable of massive weeks. And like we've seen with Tua is capable of massive weeks too. This offense, from the last 2 years, what we've seen is a fantasy gold mine. And if you can get any piece of it, whether that be Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Tua, Devon Achane, I think you're doing yourself a favor. Just like I've hammered home pretty much this whole breakdown, you want those dynamic weeks, those league-winning weeks, and we've seen Tua and Jalen Waddle do it together before. After Tua, Goff goes, Rashid Shaheed, which I think is a great value based on the type of player he is at 10-8. Dallas Goedert, Trevor Lawrence, Devin Singletary, Odell, Isaiah Likely, Blake Corum, Javonte Williams, Jacoby Myers, Mike Williams, Jerry Jeudy, and then I was on the clock here, and I'm not going to lie, I really wanted to grab Dontavian Wicks, but I was already invested into this Colts offense, so I decided to go further with it, and I decided to grab Adonai Mitchell. If you guys remember 2 years ago when Amon-Ra St. Brown, or was that 3? Whenever Amon-Ra St. Brown was a rookie, all the championship teams had Amon-Ra St. Brown on them. I'm not saying Adonai Mitchell's that, but the principle of finding a rookie who blows up late and can just easily win you fantasy weeks, and I think Adonai Mitchell has that profile. He's a big play explosive threat. He's an easy separator. He's a downfield separator. He's a big touchdown threat in the red zone, being 6'4". So at this point in the draft, with already having Anthony Richardson, I wanted to find a guy who I believe was a really high upside rookie. on a good offense who could really end up winning weeks late when he got the chance. And for me, that was Adonai Mitchell. But I'll touch on the other guy in Dontavian Wicks. I love Dontavian Wicks. I think he is the second most talented receiver on that Green Bay Packers offense. In terms of, for all you guys who like metrics, he was second on that team in yards per route run, second on that team in adjusted yards per route run behind Jaden Reed. And I thought his film was awesome. Like, honestly, he was a smooth, easy separator. He was fantastic against zone coverage, understanding soft spots in zone. And I think as the year goes on, the Packers are going to slowly start to maneuver him into that number 2 spot, and he's that number 2 guy alongside Jaden Reed. And then touching on the other guys after Adonai Mitchell was Chase Brown, Justin Herbert, Jahan Dotson, Gus Edwards, Austin Eckler, Kirk Cousins, Jerome Ford, Pat Freiermuth, Dalton Schultz. And then we come back to my pick at the 12-6, and I went Josh Downs. This might be a little overexposure to the Colts offense, right? But Josh Downs is another guy who's really interesting and really intrigues me. Another really talented guy, another really easy separator, another guy who had a few huge weeks in fantasy last year. And I think in terms of this pick at wide receiver, would I have rather just kept investing in the Colts offense or grab a Gabe Davis who we know is capable of ginormous weeks? That was my decision here, and ultimately, I decided to just rock out with the Colts offense, right? Hopefully, these connections can just be huge for me and win me weeks. And then after that, Xavier Legette, which I think at the 12-7 is a huge value for a guy who was a first-round receiver. I don't think you'll see any other first-round receivers ever go this low in best ball drafts, so I think that's a great value. Zach Charbonnet, Ezekiel Elliott, another player that I think at the moment is a good value. His path to touches is so clear on a dynamic offense, on an offense that's going to score a lot of points. If you told me that Ezekiel Elliott fell into 10 touchdowns this year, I wouldn't be surprised. So at the 12-9 to get that and have a guy who could score 3 touchdowns in a week, I think that's an awesome pick there. And then followed by Gabe Davis, Kendre Miller, Jonnu Smith, Nick Chubb, Rico Dowdle, Jalen Polk, Marshawn Lloyd, Ty Chandler, TJ Hawkinson. So here I was a little mad because I was hoping TJ Hawkinson would come back around to me at 13-7. I was really hoping for that, but I decided to go Luke Musgrave instead. Luke Musgrave was a guy who was a high second-round pick last year. Showed a little bit of promise. I know Tucker Kraft took over when Musgrave was hurt a lot last year, and he looked good. But out of the options left, I really just felt like Luke Musgrave was the guy on the best offense with the least amount of pure target competition. I was also looking at Cole Kmet, but how many guys can Caleb Williams throw to, right? You have DJ Moore. You have Keenan Allen. You have Rome Odunze. DeAndre Swift's going to get his in the pass game. How many targets, receptions, yards, and touchdowns does that truly leave for Cole Kmet? I just see a much easier pathway for Luke Musgrave to have production than I do Cole Kmet. After that was Quentin Johnston, Darnell Mooney, Tyler Algier, Jermaine Burton, Jalen Wright, Ray Davis, Malachi Corley, Roman Wilson, Jaleel McLaughlin. And then I came back with Deshaun Watson. So a huge thing in these best ball drafts is to get stacks, right? I had an Amari Cooper share earlier, and I think that Deshaun Watson, like I said earlier, if he just a little bit better than he was last year, you're going to see a massive improvement in his fantasy output and in Amari Cooper's potential production. Watson is a guy with his skill set, like the guys I mentioned before, being a dual threat quarterback. He's a guy who's capable of massive weeks, right? And if he has a 30-point week and then supports Amari Cooper to have a 30-point week, that's a huge week for us, right? That's a week that could potentially win us a week and win us a matchup. So that's what I was thinking here, and I always think that in these best ball formats, you should aim for 2 stacks. I think 3 might even be more ideal, just because a lot of them are really cheap this year, and you constantly want to have that chance to have those massive blow up weeks, right? You always want to have that chance where 2 guys instantly win you a week. And I was trying to find a quarterback wide receiver duo that did that on my team, And I think I did that 3 times with Waddle, Tua, Anthony Richardson, Pittman, and Watson, Cooper. And then after that was Antonio Gibson, Hunter Henry, Matthew Stafford, Kamani Vidal, Will Levis, Adam Thielen, Aaron Rodgers, Braylon Allen, Demario Douglas, Rashad Bateman, Marvin Mims, Baker Mayfield. And then I went with Chuba Hubbard. I mean, at the 15-7, this is crazy. This is the guy who, while Jonathan Brooks is healing up and not ready to play right away, he's going to be the starter. He's going to be the innings eater. He's a guy that we've seen get 25-plus carries, 25-plus touches in a game, and have some pretty big fantasy weeks. And on an improved offense, when his direct competition isn't going to be healthy right away, I think the 15-7 is a steal. And at the fact that I already had Jonathan Brooks, I had to hammer this. So while people might not like that I have full control of the Panthers' backfield in this draft, I personally love it. Like I said, I think they're going to be drastically improved. I have the guy who's going to start the first however many weeks of the season, and then I have the rookie who I believe is going to come on very strong at the end of the season. So I definitely love this about my draft. There's some things I would fix, as I've already stated, and I will at the end of this video, but I absolutely love what I did here with Chuba Hubbard. Then it goes DeMarcus Robinson, Troy Franklin, Khalil Herbert, Bucky Irvin, Wan'Dale Robinson, Ben Sinnott, Geno Smith, Elijah Mitchell, Tyrone Tracy, Cade Otton, and I went Jalen Hyatt here. I really wanted Elijah Mitchell to come back to me just as a pure Christian McCaffrey insurance policy. I know I don't have Christian McCaffrey, but if anything were to happen to Christian McCaffrey this year, I'm not saying it is, right? But if anything were to happen to Christian McCaffrey this year, Elijah Mitchell's a plug-and-play RB1 in that offense. Best offense in football, most weapons in football. They're going to score the most points in football. And being able to get Elijah Mitchell at the 16th round, that's a steal in my opinion. And other things you have to factor with that, Christian McCaffrey's going on 2 straight years now of not being hurt and touching the ball about 450 times in both those years. He's coming off a long season, the longest season of his career this last year, and he's going to have the shortest offseason of his career. I'm not saying he's going to get hurt, right? But if there was a pathway for him to get injured, I don't think anybody would be surprised if it were this year. So after that, I was really hoping for Elijah Mitchell for that reason. And then I decided to go Jalen Hyatt. Jalen Hyatt was the guy I was going to take at the 17th round if he was there. He's a guy with his skill set that I love to chase in these drafts, right? He's a guy who can easily take the top off a defense 2 to 3 times a game for 40-yard touchdowns. So this late in this draft, these are the type of guys I like to take a shot on, guys who have that game-breaking potential any given week, and Jalen Hyatt does that. There was a lot of plays on film last year where Jalen Hyatt was wide open down the field, and Daniel Jones just either didn't throw it or threw it inaccurately. So let's hope that Jalen Hyatt can have a few big weeks for us this year. After that, you saw Luke McCaffrey, Michael Wilson, Bryce Young, Chig Okonkwo, Tyler Conklin, Dameon Pierce, J.K. Dobbins. J.K. Dobbins, that's an interesting pick at the 17-1, getting a guy who could potentially be a starting running back in the 17th round is great value. Yeah. And then Jalen Tolbert, Drake May, Noah Fant, Derek Carr, J.J. McCarthy. And then I went Tank Bigsby here at the 17-7. Exact reasoning for Tank Bigsby as with Elijah Mitchell. Anything goes wrong with Travis Etienne, Tank Bigsby is a set it and forget it, maybe low-end RB1, high-end RB2, just due to pure volume on a great offense. So, yeah, that's why I went Tank Bigsby there. And then Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Justin Fields, Jalen McMillan, Roshan Johnson, Javon Baker, Zay Jones, Colby Parkinson, Will Shipley, Russell Wilson, Deontay Foreman, and then I finished out my draft with Elijah Moore. I mean, Elijah Moore is such a polarizing player, right? He was a guy that was just so good as a rookie. And then year 2, he was just in such a horrific situation. Year 3, he gets traded. He has to deal with Deshaun Watson being awful for the majority he was there. Then they jumble quarterbacks. They don't really know what they're doing. Joe Flacco ends up coming in, taking over, and he's good. But I just see a pathway here where Elijah Moore is the second most productive wide receiver on this Browns offense. I'm not the biggest Judy guy. I think a lot of people who know me will tell you that. I think he's extremely overrated and extremely overvalued. Yeah, and if we're being honest, when Deshaun Watson was healthy, one of his favorite targets was Elijah Moore. And I think bringing in Jerry Jeudy actually helps Elijah Moore due to the fact that his skill set, just being that true move piece, a guy who can line up in the slot, a guy who can line up as a flanker and be that motion piece. He can separate the field vertically, he can separate the field horizontally. I think he's a great fit now with Jerry Jeudy in this offense, and I think you can see a legitimate bounce back year from Elijah Moore. But yeah, so that's how my 18 rounds in the Puppy 2 draft went. Like I said, the things I really do like about this draft is the stack exposure I have. I really love what I did there. Being able to get 3 legitimate stacks, in my opinion. I love that, especially with the players that I got. I think I have dynamic players in each one of those stacks. Those guys can easily win weeks. I mean, you saw Amari Cooper last year with 52 points in the fantasy playoffs, right? Anthony Richardson can go for 40 any given week. Jalen Waddle can go for 40 any given week. Michael Pittman's a guy who's going to have an extremely high target share in this offense as the true number one for the Indianapolis Colts. Looking back on it, would I have liked this draft better if I had A.J. Brown at the 7 hole and had those 4 stud wide receivers early? Probably. And that's probably where I would go to start the draft. I'm not mad about having the hero RB build with Bijan Robinson. But if I could go back and do it, I'd probably go A.J. Brown at that 7 hole instead and have A.J. Brown, Waddle, Pittman, Cooper. Probably like that build a little more. And then the Kenneth Walker pick doesn't bother me as much. And then my RB1 and RB2 are Walker and Brooks, and I really like that build. Other than that, I mean, I could have kept Bijan and then went with Rome. I probably like that build as well. But personally, I would have rather had that hammer of A.J. Brown who can give me 100-plus yards and a touchdown any given week over the rookie wide receiver in the 6th round. Yeah, I mean, other than that, I really do like the draft. Like I said, I had to reach on Brandon Cooks just to get a wide receiver in here who I was pretty high on to really solidify that core. I love Tua. Yeah, correlated. Yeah, I mean, I really do like this draft. It's not my best one. It's not my favorite one. But I just wanted to bring you guys through and talk you through what I was thinking, how I plan these drafts. Yeah, and I actually have a live one that I made coming out for you guys soon. I made one mistake picking that as well, and that was also in the 6th round, so maybe the 6th round is just not good for me. But yeah, if you guys liked, I'll be back with more. Consider liking, comment, and subscribing. And yeah, catch you guys in the next one. Thank you.